what is food accessibility and affordability? Why is it a big deal? Well, 30% of the world population lacks access to adequate food. So today we're going to take a systems view or a futures lens to the whole thing and say, what are some of the known or unknown indicators that are shaping our future of food? What's impacting it today? And why is food accessibility growing as a bigger problem every day?
Thanks very much, Yasmin. I'm here because I, fundamentally believe that everybody has a right to food, and we as a country are failing on that front. Here's the Daily Bread food bank usage over the past number of years. It hasn't included all of 2023, but spoiler alert, 2023 is horrific. We were surprised at the lack of resiliency that individuals had. There was an acute shock to the system, and people did not have 6 months of income stowed away. They did not have decent, affordable housing that they could rely on when their incomes changed. And so, as a result, the lineups at food banks, you saw it all on television. The lineups increased dramatically. So, used to be that you worked hard, you got an education, got a job, you'd be fine. That's not the case anymore. 35% of food bank users have full-time employment. And so they've done everything right. And yet the costs of living, whether it's in the lack of affordable housing or how we're dealing with inflation, are such that you still need to rely on food charity.
Food banks are very important. They serve a very important need right now, but ultimately the goal is to make them obsolete. I wanted to talk a bit about the national food policy. The vision statement was, all people in Canada are able to access a sufficient amount of safe, nutritious, and culturally diverse food. Canada's food system is resilient and innovative, sustains our environment, and supports our economy. Neil was talking about COVID and its impacts with food banks. I think as a whole, the resilience of our food systems was seriously tested over COVID. And it was also a moment where people in cities maybe became a bit more aware of food systems and started thinking about them more, because suddenly we saw how some of those food chains and supply chains were breaking down. What can we do? We can all play a role together to get things done. So I mentioned that lots of people participate in developing the food policy. We need to be able to also raise voices with politicians like me. To be quite honest, I get no letters about food policy, almost none, which I find fascinating given how important of an issue it is. So it's important, reach out to your local electeds of all orders of government about your ideas on how to support better food systems, better infrastructure.
So the food system is making us sick. And of course, food is the foundation of health. In terms of our human health, really the foundation of these health impacts come from chemical intensive agriculture. So these are industrial agricultural practices that are driving the worst health and environmental impacts that we see across the world. So chemical intensive agriculture, concentrated livestock agriculture, really the most dangerous jobs are in seafood and in confined animal agriculture, ultra processed foods, which are making us sick. What we really need is food systems transformation from a focus on yield and calories to human, ecological, and animal health and well-being. So there has to be a well-being focus. And there's this new ascendant, what I call an ascendant narrative that contrasts to the prevailing narrative. If we can solve for the growing inequality that we face around the world, we will also solve for the climate crisis and the environmental crisis that we're in.
This crisis is global. We've seen a dramatic increase in world hunger while inflation is continuing. In Canada, 1 in 8, as Yasmin said, 1 in 8 households is still struggling to feed their families. In Souk locally here, we got 15% of people having trouble getting food on the table, and as many as 28% who can't afford nutritious food. So we look at the money of this, there's a strong argument that the food crisis isn't reality, it's the affordable housing crisis. Because between 2020 and 2021, apartment rents rose, up to $2,000 a month. The increased rental price in places like London, Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto is costing tenants up to $1,000 more every month. And so there's an obvious cause. The money has to pay the rent or else you go evicted. So you can't spend it on food, so you go to the food bank. And I just want to reiterate what Yasmin said, that the global sustainable development goals that Canada signed on to call for zero hunger by 2030. I'm moving to the big picture here. Look at this. During the pandemic, the big global food corporations paid $53.5 billion to their shareholders out of excess profits generated from food, you could say price increases, inflation, and profiteering. At the same time, UN's estimated the amount needed in 2023 to feed the world's 230 million most vulnerable people is $51.5 billion. So the money needed to feed the world's most vulnerable is going as profits to the shareholders. So to build food sovereignty, we have to return autonomy to the farm producers, shorten the supply chains, ban the commodity index funds, which encourage food speculation, food price speculation by Wall Street funds, and then have things like a national windfall tax on windfall profits and channel the money back to lowest income people. And we need a retail code of conduct to end the supermarkets' abuses of their oligopoly. The way to double world food production is to return the land to small farmers and get it out of the hands of the big cartels and oligopolists. When you use regenerative organic farming, we're restoring the soil, restoring carbon in the soil, restoring farm incomes, restoring biodiversity, and producing healthy food.
So what are the solutions? So I have 5 that I'll go through pretty quickly. 1, cities need to develop their own strategies. That's something we've argued for in North America as well as internationally. Cities are big, they're massive. They need to come up with their own strategies instead of thinking the state's going to solve it, which they aren't. And maybe if you're the biggest city in your territory or region or state, maybe, but if you're a smaller city, most likely you're going to get ignored. Cities in the US are getting that message because they're being told by our federal government and state level governments that you're going to be on your own. So you need their own strategies, they need your own solutions. We do this in economic and community development. We decentralize it. We understand cities really can be, they know what's happening best and they can come up with the best solutions. We need strategic coordinated action among not only nonprofit, corporate, and government, so the triple sector, getting them to work together, but between nonprofits who are both very, very good at collaborating when they need to, and also can be not great at collaborating, in part because you have lots of passion, which is really what drives nonprofits and tightly held agendas. And part of our work is, when we go into cities, is help table setting and help all of these different players, because you cannot get food to scale without bringing all of these people to the table and understanding how best to leverage what everyone has.
Nick Saul, the CEO of Canada Food Centres, often talks about food insecurity not as a food issue, but as an income issue. And so if we look at what are those possible solutions, I think we need to look at the income statement of every Canadian and understand, do they have the income to be able to thrive in community? And are their expenses like affordable housing appropriate?
Yeah, I think, if every city was forced to have a plan for how they feed their citizens, both in current state and if they had a natural disaster, and came up with a funding mechanism for that, with philanthropic sector involved, but also figuring out government mechanisms. And so not relying on the let's hope that everyone's going to empty their purses in the time of disaster. That is what we want, is some permanent financing mechanisms, some permanent planning with the institutions that we already have.
People need to understand there's an alternative way of doing things to being either market fundamentalist or left-wing socialist Marxist stuff. And I got a database of 200 organizations working on the new economy for this sort of stuff, but it hasn't hit the public profile that this is going on, but it's a real movement that's happening around the world.
And the challenge here for the panelists and for anyone listening in is, if you have an idea and you want to mobilize it and put a pilot together and make it happen, let us know, because it's time. As we all said, as Neil, you said, we haven't built back better. We talked about that before the pandemic. We didn't